So what is Czech politics up to again? We have two topics here. First, Filip Turek, who supposedly wants to vote in Brussels and claims he has the right to do so because even though he's not a minister, he would like to vote in Brussels. We'll talk about how voting in Brussels actually works, why he can't do it, and why his feeling that he can is a mistaken one. And then we'll take a look at Pavel, who once again couldn't keep his mouth shut, and a few years after saying that Donald Trump is a disgusting, repulsive human being whom he never wants to meet again, he declared that Trump has done more damage to NATO than Vladimir Putin. So we'll take a look at this game Pavel is playing here, which is probably the start of his pre-election campaign, his presidential campaign, because just a few days ago, he announced that he doesn't see anyone he'd want to vote for and that he'll most likely run again. It seems he's already starting that campaign. Not that he ever really stopped, he's been building up his popularity continuously. However, we'll start with Mr. Filip Turek, then we'll smoothly move from the Motorists to Pavel, because of course it follows naturally. Since the beef, the so-called hovězí, is probably the biggest between these parties. So Filip Turek can vote in Brussels, blah. What's the problem? The problem is that Filip Turek is not a minister, he's just the government's appointed representative for the Green Deal, which basically means nothing. He only has legislative power, he's a member of parliament, so that's the legislative branch. A minister is part of the executive branch, meaning executive power. So now, the Minister of the Environment is Mr. Červený, who is supposed to do everything for Mr. Turek, Member of Parliament Turek, that he wants. For example, he lets Filip Turek, with his authorization, go to the EU Environment Ministers Summit, where Filip Turek can present the ministry's views, communicate with people, represent, basically do everything, because he is authorized by the Minister of the Environment, so he can do it. What he can't do. Co nemůže dělat? So he can't vote. Filip Turek simply can't vote, because only someone who is a minister or at the ministerial level can vote within the European Union. I believe that at the ministerial level, it can also be an ambassador or a deputy minister and other such people, let's say other officials in the executive branch, but not Filip Turek, who is neither a minister nor an official at that level. The argument that he could be authorized by the minister to vote on his behalf is invalid, because for this, the minister cannot authorize someone who is a legislator and not an executive, since in that case the executive and legislative branches would overlap too much. At the same time, when you vote in the European Union, of course, there are certain rules, and you are effectively committing your state, you are committing your country to do something. It's the person who votes who commits the government. And a person who is not a minister, nor part of the executive, but is part of the legislature, does not have the authority to commit the government, and it is not possible to delegate this authority to them. Therefore, for this reason, Filip Turek actually cannot have the authority to commit the government unless he becomes a minister or someone at that ministerial level. As I said, it's not just some formality, it's because the mandate to commit the government comes from democracy, from some kind of popular vote, and from presidential appointment and so on. And based on that, you have this ability to act, and it actually maintains the form and the democratic nature of the process within the European Union. If Filip Turek were to cast a vote in that situation, his vote, not that it wouldn't be valid, but there's a risk in that, since he doesn't have the authority to commit the government, our government could say, well, actually, it was Filip Turek who voted. It wasn't our minister. So actually, we don't agree with it. Actually, we won't abide by it. Actually, we haven't committed to anything. Actually, it doesn't matter at all, right? So based on this, the person who commits the government has to be there. The person who commits the government after their authority comes from democratic elections and democratic appointment by the president, and at the same time, it's a person who is part of the executive, not the legislature, so that the powers don't conflict and it all stems from democracy. Another thing, though, that someone might argue is that the president of the Czech Republic, broke the law by not appointing Filip Turek as minister. So according to the law of the Czech Republic, Filip Turek should be a minister. But he isn't, right? Let's say, okay, let's assume that according to the law, Filip Turek should be a minister and Petr Pavel is the one who is breaking the law. So some injustice was done to Filip Turek, and now Filip Turek wants to do what he would be doing if the laws of the Czech Republic were followed. But you can't do it like that. You can't skip the process. You can't bypass the court process. You can't bypass the judiciary. You can't decide on your own what the verdict should be. That's again a conflict between the branches of power in a democracy. You have a conflict between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And Filip Turek, as the legislature, is bypassing the judiciary here and putting himself in the role of the executive. Which is simply wrong. It's tearing down those democratic pillars. A brutal tearing down. And it's disrespectful to democratic pillars. You simply can't skip the court. If someone robs you, you can ask the court to send that person to prison and to decide that the person has to return your property. But you can't punish the person who robbed you instead of the court. Yeah, you can't punish him before the court decides that he deserves punishment. You can't put him in prison just because you think he should be in prison because he stole things. No. The court has to decide that the person will go to prison, and at that moment you get your things back and the punishment happens. In the same way, Filip Turek could only become a minister if the court decided that he had been wronged, or rather that Andrej Babiš had been wronged when he wasn't appointed minister. And based on that, the act would have to be carried out that Filip Turek becomes a minister, because the court decided that the president doesn't have the authority not to appoint him, right? That would have had to happen, but it didn't, so the court process didn't take place, and we can't act as if it did, make decisions for the court, interpret the law ourselves, and take on some constitutional judicial authority that we don't have. That's what Filip Turek and Motorists are doing now, and it's completely stupid. We'll look like idiots in the European Union. And now, when we're talking about our politics and the connection between Petr Pavel, Motorists, and what's happening, we've already mentioned what Petr Pavel said about Trump. Here, Mr. Pavel, who wants to go to the NATO summit, is also the person who said about Trump that he is destroying and damaging NATO. He specifically said about him, Donald Trump has done more to undermine NATO's credibility in recent weeks than Vladimir Putin has managed in many years. Of course, that's not good news. So, only when the war started to develop in an unexpected direction did Donald Trump declare that European allies should ensure ships can safely pass through that strait, and so on, and so on, and so on. Simply put, Mr. Pavel, who wants to go to the NATO summit, at the same time declares that he doesn't want to meet with the American president because he finds him repulsive, and at the same time he labels the American president as someone who is harming NATO. I consider this a step into the presidential campaign. Because, as I said, Petr Pavel has already started his presidential campaign. I consider this to be something that's meant to be something meant as a fake setup for the Motorists to spike. Because, in my opinion, Petr Pavel basically served this thing up nicely here and expects Makinka to spike it. But he's already prepared to respond to that spike and send it back to them. In the sense that Donald Trump is an idiot. Everyone in the Czech Republic knows Donald Trump is an idiot. Donald Trump's popularity is only about 10 in the Czech Republic. The fact that Petr Pavel is now building on everyone knowing that he hates Trump, and now he's even doubling down on it like this, that's something that will earn him political points. Makinka now, by his nature, because he's the Czech Trump supporter, has to defend Trump. He has to hit back at Pavel for that. But by hitting back at him, of course Petr Pavel will be able to say, you see, the Motorists, they're on the side of Trump, who's disrupting everything here. Petr Makinka, a total Trump supporter, he would probably want things here to be like in America. Probably yes, probably yes. And you see, Petr Makinka confirmed that I, Petr Pavel, am the anti-Trump guy. So the one you're supposed to like, because nobody in Czechia likes Trump. And remember how Babiš liked Trump and all these things. This is a setup for Petr Makinka to score, but it's a fake setup. It's a trap for Petr Makinka. Or maybe Pavel just doesn't watch what he says. That's also a possibility. That's also a possibility, but I assume he's more intelligent than just blurting things out without thinking. That would really be stupid. Yeah, that would probably be really stupid. And I'd say that someone this stupid with such unstrategic thinking would never have made it. First, a general, second, a military attaché to NATO, and third, a president. Yeah, like a person who was this stupid, who couldn't play strategically, probably wouldn't have gotten these high positions in the army, in NATO, and in the state. So I assume he simply has the ability for strategic thinking. And as for the reaction of motorists, I haven't seen that yet or anything like that. But the point is, of course, whether Pavel will go to the NATO summit or not. The question now is whether he even wants to attend the NATO summit. Because it seems to me that with this statement, he has postponed the summit even further and made it even harder for himself to justify why he should go there and why Makinka would want him there. He has deepened the divide even more, and I would say that he just wants to appear as if he wants to go to the NATO summit. He doesn't want to give up. He wants to look confident. He wants to look strong. But effectively, he probably wouldn't mind not going to the NATO summit in the end, because he really doesn't want to argue with Trump there. But he can't give in to Babiš and Makinka because he would look weak. So he's doing everything he can to make sure the government doesn't let him go, so that they don't want him there. And at the same time, he's positioning himself against Trump, which earns him political points. And at the same time, he's positioning himself against motorists, which also earns him political points and forces motorists to defend Trump, which weakens them. Good game, Petri, good game. Or like I said, maybe it just happens to work out for you kind of carelessly and you actually don't know what you're doing. Maybe I'm just seeing some kind of plan in your Dumbledore-like chaos that isn't really there. If it's a plan, it's a smart one. So that's it. That's the current political situation. And I'm telling you, the Turk will cause a lot more embarrassment. And with Pavel, there will still be some fun. Especially if you keep going after Donald Trump. So that's it. This video was made during a live stream. Please write in the comments what you think about this whole situation, about this whole political mess in the Czech Republic right now. Whose side are you actually on? Do you like Trump or not? That's a weird question too, isn't it? Well, yeah, support the content, give it a like, write a comment, share this video, send some money here through the QR code if you want to support independent media creation like a true patriot. In Hungary, everyone gives 1% of their income to support independent media creation, so let yourself be inspired. Oh, and definitely don't forget to click on the highlight, which is a little star that appears after you like it on your phone. See you next time. I'm continuing my stream now. Come to War Instigator at 4:30 p.m. See ya.